Due Process, honored for 3 consecutive years with the Mid-Atlantic Emmy for Outstanding Talk Program Series.
Let the dogs out!
Dogs are one thing, but are pit bulls something else? Are they more dangerous? Should they be banned? Animal risks or animal rights? On this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding is provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual.
They're the dogs most often implicated in serious attacks, even deaths. They've even been banned in England and France. I'm Raymond Brown, and on the docket for this edition of Due Process, the dreaded pit bull. There are those who would ban them in New Jersey, too, while others call that illegal and unfair. We'll hear from both sides, but first, here's Sandy King.
Raymond, should we pity the poor pit bull made mad by callous owners, maligned throughout the world? Or is it just a matter of facing hard facts and banning the beast? Well, that depends on whom you ask. The victim of a disfiguring attack, an owner who calls 2 of them his babies, an advocate who says even the most vicious are themselves just victims, or an animal control officer who fears any encounter with a pit bull can turn deadly. We'll introduce you to all 4.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
And that's just what this teenager wanted to know after a pit bull attacked her in Belleville one night.
It was weird, though. He really messed my leg up.
Leaving her with scars, both physical and emotional, that may never be fully healed.
The dog had actually pulled all the skin from my muscle and removed a piece of the muscle in my calf. Damage was so extensive that they had to call a plastic surgeon in.
Catilia Velez was just 17, getting ready for her prom just 2 days away, and her friend had a shawl that would make her prom gown perfect. Catilia had gone to pick it up, walked up the stairs, and rang the bell. But before her friend could let her in, the pit bull from next door had begun to tear her leg apart.
I was screaming and screaming and screaming some more, and my friend came out and she went ahead and called 911.
Catilia never made it to the prom, but that was the least of it. Now, nearly 3 years later, with 2 plastic surgeries behind her and at least 1 more to go, she is still haunted by the memories of that night.
The owner came running up and basically pulled him off of my leg, and I think that when he did that, that's when it did the most damage.
He lunged straight up for my face, and I just blocked him with my hand. Had the walkie-talkie in my hand. He clamped onto my hand and I was able to kick him off of me.
It is those kinds of attacks in which the large-headed muscular crossbreed uses its powerful jaws to lock on that has made the pit bull the dog most feared and most maligned, though some insist it's just been a bad rap.
It's not the dog, it's the people that make the dogs what they are. They do have capacity to be strong, that's in their nature, but you have to bring that out in them and you have to instill it. They're not born vicious, they're not born to lock, they're not born to kill cats.
But whether it's nature or nurture, the range of crossbreed terriers known as pit bulls do account for a disproportionate number of canine attacks and canine kills.
When I get a call to respond to either a pit bull attacking somebody or a pit bull fighting with another pit bull, I mean, I remember all the past experiences that I've had with pit bulls and how dangerous they are. And I literally pray all the way to the call, Lord, just protect me on this call, because it's life-threatening.
In fact, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control reports that of 199 fatal dog attacks recorded between 1979 and 96, pit bulls, who represent about 1% of American dogs, were responsible for nearly 2/3 of the kills.
That all has to do with the training. When they're young, they put heavy chains on their neck. They would give them kittens. People would kill the kittens so they would get the taste of the blood and the smell of the blood. Once a pit bull does, unfortunately, grab an animal, you're not breaking them up unless you got a breaking stick.
Lawyer Damon Sedita learned what that can be like when his little dog Samson came up against 2 pit bulls at the Branchbrook Park tennis courts in Newark.
And when I looked up, there were these 2 pit bulls, and I saw quickly that something was wrong and that a couple of my friends were running from the steps of this building toward the tree with tennis rackets in their hand.
It took a half-dozen players and their rackets to get the pit bulls off of little Samson.
These 2 were loose. The larger of the 2 slipped from, he appeared to be biting on the back, and I thought he was stopping, and he wasn't. He was slipping up to try to bite Samson around the neck and did do that, and then he was just shaking him, looked like a rag doll.
And the pit bull had him, and the pit bull must have just let him go. And I grabbed Samson, the pit bull circling me, and I'm yelling to the owner, "Get your dog, put a leash on him, get him, come over here and get him." "Oh, don't worry, he doesn't bite people."
But that was little comfort for Samson, who suffered 7 wounds and countless stitches and a $500 vet's bill.
These are my babies.
But just a few blocks away from the scene of the Samson mauling is the other side of the pit bull story.
They're really lovable dogs.
Greg Nelson says it's all in the training. He says his dogs are loved and they respond in kind.
These are my babies.
But for lots of pit bulls, there's a different kind of input. Some are trained for protection, while others are trained to fight other dogs, sometimes to the death.
There's blood, dripping from them, and they're tearing the skin off each other, and they're just digging in for dear life.
There's big money in pit bull fighting. A lot of times, though, when the dog doesn't win the fight, the owners burn the dogs, leave them to die.
What are you hiding there? I'm gonna get the gang's dog.
It's all a far cry from the pit bull Petey of Little Rascals fame, but it's the image of the bloodthirsty pit bull and a record of shocking attacks on people that has made the pit bull a pariah in places like England, Germany, and France.
I think it's horrible. I really do. I don't think people should ban anything as far as these dogs are concerned. These are my guys.
But to know them may not be to love them.
That particular dog that I picked up in Passaic that bit me, just recently that same dog had his 3rd bite in Clifton.
But when Clifton tried to get tough on pit bulls,
Animal activist groups protested it. They said it was unconstitutional.
and they found a friend in state law, which has so far outlawed all breed-specific local rules, despite those who say that the pit bull really may be different.
It's in their nature. We can't get into the building sometimes. They're barking, some people leave them in during the day, they go to work.
Until you see it and how sudden it happens and how violent it is, you can't appreciate the danger that apparently is inherent in this kind of a dog.
I can understand banning them. I really can. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it or not, but I most definitely believe that there should be a muzzle law enacted everywhere. Everywhere, you know.
Who let my dogs out?
But for victims like Atilia Velez, the pit bull is no laughing matter. It's also not the only dog that's been involved in vicious, even fatal attacks. Some studies show that Rottweilers may be equally dangerous. So is the answer to ban both breeds, or is it to get tougher on their owners?
That's the question we'll be putting to our guests here in the studio and in Newark, so stay with us.
I think the ones that are vicious should get put to sleep, but the other ones should, they should leave them alone.
They're not safe animals to have, and people use them for bad things, so maybe they should ban them.
I've had friends who have pit bulls. If you raise a dog well, they'll be a very good, loving, compassionate companion to you.
I think there's certain animals that shouldn't be pets. I mean, you're not going to have a pet gorilla. You probably shouldn't have a pet pit bull either.
I think that we shouldn't be infringing on people's rights, and I think that if a person wants to own a pit bull, they should own a pit bull, and that's all I have to say.
Better controls, outright bans. Is public policy failing to keep up with a pressing need, or are we trampling dog and owner rights with the very idea of laws targeted at certain allegedly vicious breeds? We're sure to get some very different answers from Alan Darnell, a lawyer who won a jury trial for a client who was severely injured by a pit bull, and from Christopher Jaksic, a breeder and judge of Staffordshire Bull Terriers, who joins us from Newark. Gentlemen, welcome. Alan, let me start with you.
Sure.
First of all, what's your position on the public policy question? Should there be some legislative action on pit bulls, and if so, what should it be?
In New Jersey, we have a dog bite statute that says that if your dog bites somebody, you're liable. But that only comes in after the fact, after somebody's bitten. And to give some numbers to it, each year 4.7 million people are bitten by dogs, and half of them are children. And I think that to come in after the fact and deal with the problem is a little too late.
Sounds like you're arguing for a ban.
Oh, absolutely. I think that...
Why this particular breed?
Because this particular breed is a disproportionate problem to the number of dogs. Whether you call it a people problem as to the way the dogs are bred and trained, or because it is in the dog's genetics. In the person who has the pit bull clamped to their leg or some other body part doesn't matter much to them. In my view, the only way to solve the problem is to ban pit bulls and perhaps other dogs that are known for their ferocity and viciousness.
Christopher, let me bring you into the conversation. First, two things. You are familiar with this particular kind of dog. You also have some background in the law. You're a West Orange policeman, but you want to make it clear you don't speak for that department.
That's correct.
What is your position in response to Alan's advocating a ban on pit bulls?
I disagree. I think that we should be punishing the deed, not the breed, whether it's pit bull, American Staffordshire Terrier, Staffordshire Bull Terrier, or Bull Terrier. You have to define pit bull. Pit bull is a very generic or general term that we don't recognize as far as dog owners.
But let me ask you this. When we use the term pit bull, we are generally talking about breeds that at least have a history of being bred early on for aggressiveness and who have pretty strong jaws and are tenacious. Would that suggest that one should be concerned about looking at them differently from other animals or not?
Well, they should, and we as breeders actually screen people to avoid confrontation or possible problems. They were bred to fight each other, not bite or fight people. I have two small children with my 4 Staffordshire Bull Terriers at home and never had a problem. I've been bit by 3 dogs, none of which have been pit bulls.
But generally speaking, we see lots of folks with pit bulls who aren't licensed. And certainly part of the argument that I've heard advocates who are in favor of having pit bulls around is that it's really the owner and not the dog. But how do we control that if people aren't licensed and if almost anyone can buy one?
Well, I agree that, we do need to punish the owner, not the dog. It's not the dog's fault that it's been punished or abused or been misfed or physically abused in some way that possibly entice it to fight or to bite or teach it to bite. We need to go after the people that own and treat and mistreat these animals, not the animal themselves. They're not at fault.
But given the fact that anyone can own one, and given the fact that these are dogs that were originally bred to fight and are tough and aggressive, why isn't it a good policy position to say we don't need to take the risk, which is what Alan seems to be advocating? What's the argument on the other side that says let's just be safe and minimize this risk by not having them?
Because we have so many dogs out there that bite and so many different breeds that bite. Why pick on one dog? If you're going to pick on one dog, you need to pick on all the biters. And if you look at statistics, the fluffy golden retriever actually leads the bites every year. So you can't go by the bite.
Now, if we talk about a policy question, it sounds as though Chris is saying, look, there are other breeds that bite, and given the fact that the owner's involvement is an important part of the dynamic, it's unreasonable as a matter of public policy to single out pit bulls.
I think that the statistics that you quoted early in the program on the number of pit bulls that are involved in fatal attacks sort of disintegrates the argument that pit bulls are somehow just like other dogs.
I want you to finish that, but Chris, what about fatal attacks? Are not pit bulls involved disproportionately in fatal attacks, given the fact that once they latch on, they're not readily dislodged?
It appears to be by the statistics. I was unaware of those statistics.
But would that change your view if a higher percentage of the pit bull attacks result in death? Would that change your position on the policy question?
No, it wouldn't. I'd like to see the total breakdown, actually, on what other breeds are involved and what percentage they hold. It may be high in Rottweiler or Dalmatian or any other type of dog. You're picking on the pit bull, which unfortunately seems to be the latest thing to do, is pick on a specific breed.
Alan, lawyers are trained to look at broad questions and see that everybody is treated in a similar fashion in a policy sense. Why isn't it unfair to pick on pit bulls as opposed to anybody who is engaged in training a dog to be vicious or too aggressive?
Let me bore you in a bit by referring to a Supreme Court of Ohio decision a few years ago called State versus Anderson, where they upheld the statute of a town that said pit bull owners have to have special requirements in training. And in doing that, they described why are pit bulls different from other dogs. And there's a list of them. Let me just give you a few. A history of frenzy, unusual and relentless ferocity, extreme concentration in fighting and attacking, history of catching, fighting, and killing instinct, highly tolerant of pain.
Chris, is he saying anything that isn't accurate as a description of pit bulls? Is what he's saying an accurate description of their characteristics?
No, he appears to be accurate in what he stated, as far as, which is also the reason his last statement was the highly tolerant to pain, which is why they're so good with children.
I was going to say, give me the other side. I'm a person who, for example, there are some neighborhoods where almost every second or third house seems to have a pit bull in the front yard, the backyard. Given the potential danger there, what's the argument that says we ought to run that risk? What's the plus of pit bulls?
Well, the plus is, that they're very family-oriented. They're very protective of their home, as are most canines. They're very protective of their owners, especially children. They seem to bond with children significantly. As I stated, I have 2 small children. My dogs are inseparable from my children and will probably do anything possible to protect them if they felt they were going to be harmed.
Now, Alan, you cheated a little bit by referring to an Ohio Supreme Court decision. Right. So I'm going to drag you back to New Jersey and say, right now, it isn't possible for any local town to ban a particular breed.
That is absolutely true. The state legislature has passed statutes that says you cannot have breed-specific laws.
Breed, meaning you can't focus on a breed and say that breed.
Right.
Now, that means the legislature, at least as of now, has made the judgment that it isn't a rational approach to the protection problem to single out a particular breed, even on the basis of the characteristics that you read.
I think the answer to that is that when that law was passed, which was quite some time ago, we did not have the history of pit bull attacks that we've suffered in the last 15 years or so. People were not breeding pit bulls to attack people.
On almost every other edition of due process, we've got an assemblyman or a senator talking about some matter of public policy. The legislature hasn't chosen, even though there's been some publicized attacks, to change this idea that you can't focus on breeds. Why is that?
I think that the legislature has a lot of things on its mind. I think shows like this, though, when they see the statistics, perhaps will be persuasive that it is time for a change, that it is time to ban pit bulls or allow towns to have breed-specific laws, starting with pit bulls.
Chris, you're involved in the universe of people who deal with dogs. You're a judge. Are you concerned at all that down the road the state legislature will either start singling out pit bulls as a particular breed or permit local municipalities to begin to have breed-specific laws?
It's always a concern, and as Mr. Darnell stated, I believe there is some breed-specific laws in the state of Ohio that are being challenged right now. I don't know what state they are or what status they're at in their court system.
Now, you're confident, I'm sure, around the dogs that you know, but you saw, I'm sure, in our report, an animal control patrol officer who says anytime he goes out on a pit bull call, he's very frightened. As a police officer, if you have to respond to a premises where there's an unknown dog, but someone tells you it's a pit bull, does your adrenaline pump a little more? Is your heart beating a little faster on that call?
No, it's not. Any canine you have to be concerned with because, you know, some people treat them as humans when in fact they're not. They're animals. And any animal, as far as I'm concerned, can be unpredictable. And if you put them in a position where they feel they need to fight or flight and they need to get away from you and they feel possibly cornered, my position or my uniform, so to speak, may be in jeopardy, and I will do what I need to do.
Well, would your experience, both as a dog owner and as a police officer, lead you to be as apprehensive that someone may have trained a poodle or a collie or another animal in a way that could create as great a danger for you as with a pit bull, given its strength and aggressiveness?
I have seen other breeds trained that way. Feeding the big thing is feeding gunpowder powder to irritate them. Abuse will also irritate them, starving them, you know, inflicting some type of pain upon them to make them people aggressive when in fact the owner is actually petrified of the dog as well. They're my concern no matter what I do. When I go into a house or we're making an entry into a home and there's a dog there or we are aware of a dog, we have people to specifically take care of that dog if it's a threat to us.
Now, Chris and his colleagues, those who think like him, have frequently said, look, you're picking on pit bulls and their owners. Are there other breeds? Because I know you've looked into this beyond even the one case that we've talked about. Are there other breeds that you'd be concerned about?
I think Rottweilers are up there, Akitas, Japanese fighting dogs, and I think if you don't really need to describe the breed. All you need to do is have a set of criteria. For instance, does the animal possess inherent characteristics, and I'm reading now, aggression, strength, viciousness, and unpredictability, not found in other dog breeds. And it's that unpredictability part. The same animal that nuzzles you in the morning may be attacking your neighbor in the afternoon.
Now, shortly before taping this program, in the last several weeks, there have been some highly publicized
Absolutely.
attacks, but not involving either Rottweilers or pit bulls.
We had the California case where apparently some white supremacists in prison had been training some sort of dog that nobody quite knows about, some sort of mastiff from the Canary Islands, and it turns out the owners were the lawyers for those people.
But wouldn't that be an argument against focus? That is, if we assume there's a public policy problem here, wouldn't that be an argument against being breed specific? Because those were not among the breeds that would come to mind, or came to anybody's mind, as focus of attention.
Well, I think that's a very rare breed. It's so rare that nobody has a name for it. But I think generally, if you go through the criteria, and then you match the breeds to the criteria, it could be based on statistics, it could be based on the number of bites per the population, the number of deaths, and it's like pornography. You may not be an expert in it, but you know when you know it when you see it.
Chris, there's one point that Alan made early on that probably is the toughest part of his argument, and that is that it's one thing to talk about the kind of relief we can give to people once they've been attacked, but what can we do to kind of prevent it from happening? Is there anything that you think would be acceptable as a way of offering greater assurance to people that they're not in danger from the more aggressive breeds?
Well, I think we need to get out there and publicize our breed as we do in our international club, show what they're capable of doing. We have registered therapy dogs, we have agility dogs, we have AKC confirmation champions, we have AKC obedience champions. It proves that the dog can go out there and be very versatile, as well as we have a significant home life with our animals, as well as in the United States, we don't register that many a year compared to in England, and yet in England it's no problem to own a Staffordshire Bull Terrier when in fact they register somewhere around 6,000 a year.
One of our folks who we talked to earlier mentioned the muzzle law, presumably meaning that dogs would be required in public always to wear muzzles. What is your position on that, either generally or with respect to specific breeds?
I disagree with the muzzle. I think that the dogs that I have seen muzzled are actually better once you take the muzzle off of them. That I think they're actually biting at the muzzle probably to try to get rid of it. It's an unnatural thing for them to be muzzled. If someone's walking down the street with a dog muzzled, people are going to show fear. You put out a certain amount of adrenaline, and when you do so, the dog senses that right away and actually will become more aggressive. So I think it's an incorrect thing to do.
Alan, would you be satisfied with muzzles?
Now, I think that muzzles, and I do agree that what a muzzle will do is protect people while the muzzle's on, but what happens when the muzzle comes off? What happens
Quickly,
when the dog...
we got 30 seconds. Is the legislature, in your view, in the next 2 years, going to take a stand in terms of breed-specific bans?
I think they should, and I think it's a good way to get elected.
Chris, yes or no? Legislature likely to act on this question in the next 2 years?
No, I don't think they will.
Well, we'll find out, and I want to thank both of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of Due Process, but we hope you'll join us next week when we return with another cutting-edge issue of law and social justice. Till then, for Sandy King and for all of us here at Due Process, I'm Raymond Brown. Thanks for watching.
Wait up on the landing here, and whenever I give the go-ahead, they run downstairs because they always know that I'm going to walk them. So it's usually when I get home from work or something, and they'll be right here, and they'll wait, and then they'll zoom down the stairs. So these dogs are really, you have to be patient with them, but they're really lovable dogs. They're not at all, you know, what everybody, you know, makes them out to be vicious, mean, cruel animals, but no. These are my babies.
When I get a call to respond to either a pit bull attacking somebody or a pit bull fighting with another pit bull, I mean, I remember all the past experiences that I've had with pit bulls and, you know, how dangerous they are. And I literally pray all the way to the call, Lord, just protect me on this call, because it's like, it's life-threatening.
Major funding for Due Process was made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding was provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual,